Mullen from Grant Thornton. Matt, you've got a lot of clients in the tourism industry, you've got a lot of connections across the sector. Tell us about what's the pulse at the moment in the tourism sector, particularly here in Far North Queensland?
Well, we have the benefit at Grant Thornton of having a large client base throughout Far North Queensland, and in particular companies and businesses within the tourism and hospitality industry. And the general feedback from clients as well as stakeholders is that they're actually doing it a lot tougher than this time last year at the height of the pandemic.
Which is just insane to think about, that at the peak of the pandemic, I guess late 2020, we had the most government support, things like JobKeeper obviously, and yet your feedback from the industry is that it's now worse than that supposed height of the pandemic. Crazy.
Yeah, there are a couple of competing factors that are making it really difficult for most of the operators in the industry. One, lack of resources or lack of employees who are able to come in and help if the borders are open again, but most importantly, the lack of government support in relation to subsidising wages or something similar to what JobKeeper was.
And is the sector sort of telling you that, there has been some pockets of money, some targeted support, both state and federal. What's the feedback from the industry in regards to what support is available at the moment?
There's definitely been a large amount of support that's been provided by both state and federal government, but it's just not enough to get the operators through what is a really difficult time. And the feedback that I've received to date is that the support really needs to target wage subsidies so that employees can be kept on the books. Because at the moment, those operators that can afford to do so are actually keeping employees on their books through their own cash reserves, but not every operator has the privilege of having a cash reserve.
And I guess the issue there almost that you've identified is when, fingers crossed, borders do eventually reopen and we do start to, and some of the lockdowns end in New South Wales and Victoria, and we do start to see tourists come back, businesses, large and small in tourism, need to be ready to capitalise on that growth and cater for those visitors. But as you said, if they have to let staff go, that's not a good situation for the industry to be in.
No, it's not, because you're not just losing staff that might traditionally have been backpackers who might do front housework, but there are people who've been in the industry for a number of years, highly skilled individuals, who are not only leaving the region, but the industry altogether.
Major problems at the moment for tourism. What, I guess, to round off now in terms of the tourism sector, a rough guide about how long can some of these businesses hang in there? It feels like this, the pandemic is obviously now nearly 20 odd months has been ongoing. As you said, some tourism businesses are bigger than others. They can probably ride out some of the storm. But, is there a time frame and I guess a sense of urgency about what this support needs to start flowing in?
Yeah, look, it's actually a spectrum, if you like. For an operator whose sole income or line of revenue was from tourist operations or attractions, really tough times, literally a matter of months. But for those operators who might have a diverse stream of income, maybe some cash reserves, the general consensus is between 6 to 12 months. So it's dire, regardless of whether you're a large operator or a small one.
All right, there you go. That's the wrap on the tourism sector from Matt Mullen at Grant Thornton. Let's head down to Holding Redlich and have a chat to James Harding about the construction sector. All right, James from Holding Redlich. We are standing in a construction zone here at the Holding Redlich office, which is quite appropriate because very keen to talk to you about the building and construction sector. Now, you were in Cairns Report a few months ago, I guess foreshadowing or warning the potential risks facing many building companies given these crazy price rises that we're seeing in a lot of material. Tell us now, a few months on since that sort of warning that you made there, how's it all playing out at the moment in the construction sector?
Thanks, Gav. Well, it's definitely something that we're still seeing. We're seeing a lot of substitution in building materials in domestic contracts. So, for example, changing timber framing inside your walls to steel, because steel might be easier to get. The unfortunate issue is potentially steel is going to be more expensive, and then there's arguments and discussions about, well, who bears that cost? And there's been a lot of lobbying by building lobbyists such as Master Builders Australia to the QBCC. And in response to that lobbying, on 1 July, they actually brought in a new advanced dispute resolution process that specifically deals with issues concerning material shortages and labour shortages.
And so if you cast your eyes forward, if possible, over the next, let's say, 6 months or so into the first quarter of 2022, are you hearing or can you see any respite on the horizon for that issue, particularly those rising prices of materials?
I think demand's definitely come down the last few months in terms of signing up new build contracts. That's consistent with the home builder grant finishing in March. So we're seeing a lot of those builds are now have started and or near finishing. And so there hasn't been that surge that we saw in January, February, March still ongoing. So I think that will definitely relieve some of the issues that we're seeing. And then in terms of that advanced dispute resolution process, there are some criteria that I thought I'd mention in case any viewers are sort of thinking about talking about it. You do have to be a builder or a property owner and be a party to a domestic building contract with a minimum value of $150,000. And you have to be in a dispute that relates specifically to labour shortage or the cost of materials.
Okay. And so, where can people check out?
Straight to the QBCC. And there's a form you fill in, and then you're entitled to a 4-hour, not in one session, but 4 hours total of assistance with mediation. And the whole purpose of that process is to keep the communication lines open. It's not providing a specific resolution to these issues, but it's really just allowing the builder and the residents to keep those lines of communication open if they've already had a falling out in their relationship over these sorts of issues. Because ultimately it's no one's fault, and that's the annoying thing.
It's a global issue, absolutely. We saw in this edition of the Cairns Report, the September edition, that building approvals did ease off a little, still very strong, certainly year-on-year growth there, but it's certainly not an issue that's going to go away.
No, and I think what we really want to see is more of those approvals coming through and sort of relieving the burden on council in terms of their staffing requirements to sort of get those approvals done and try and reduce those numbers and try and get the builds that are waiting out and try and reduce that threshold even more. Which
hopefully helps with the crazy vacancy rate that's also published in this month's Cairns Report.
Yeah, we spoke about that a few months ago as well.
Very good. All right, James Harding from Holding Redlich. Now we're going to head over to Belle Property Cairns to find out what's happening in the real estate market.
The property market is really moving here in Cairns at the moment. Some would call it an accelerated market. Properties are selling quickly and the volume of sales has dramatically increased over the past 12 months. Generally speaking, all prices have increased in Cairns. I would say houses 10 to 15, some even 20% in certain areas if you've done improvements. But with the units, probably more in that 10 to 15% range. Again, it always depends on location and how current the property is, how old the property is, and what improvements you've made to the property, generally speaking. So certainly, I would say across the board, the market is stronger, and I would say it's certainly popular suburbs. We might say the more sought after suburbs. Sometimes they may be around, north area towards, around Mount Whitfield. Redlich has been very busy. Brinsmead. Edge Hill, Whitfield, of course, naturally, Freshwater, Stratford, all of those areas have seen good growth, really good solid growth, and especially Cairns beaches. I would say the majority of buyers for the beaches have been from Melbourne, from Victoria, a lot of them obviously looking to escape the cold, looking to buy a second residence perhaps, or looking to move up here in the next 1 to 2 years. There are buyers from down south, but not for every property, not for every location. So again, we're seeing increased volume and inquiry on all sorts of properties, but definitely if the property is older and needs a bit of work, people would like to purchase a property that's ready to go, move in immediately or rent immediately. So less DIY on that side of things. And certainly the southern buyers do seem to be a bit stronger for the beaches at this time. I just recently had a property in Palm Cove. I would say 90% of the inquiry was from the southern states. We still had local traffic, but in the end a southern buyer did buy that. And they're moving up here. So we have a lot of people coming up to Cairns, which is great news. Lots of interest. lots of interest across the board. Again, for those southern buyers, we're putting videos online, we're putting floor plans online, and in addition to that, if they're serious and if they really would like another look at the property from another angle, we're happy to do virtual tours for them. And that's working very well.